What's up, YouTube? Capital G here. Welcome to another episode of The Excellent Adventures. These are the excellent adventures of DInomist, a deck that's in a little bit of a tight spot. Obviously, it's being super outshined by Pendulum Magicians as the dominant Pendulum deck in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But I think that the future for DInomist is extremely bright right now, and I think it's because of the new Link monsters that are coming out in the Link Frames pack. Yes, we obviously know that Heavy Metaphors Electrum is just going to take Pendulum decks to a completely another level. That card is absolutely amazing, and it definitely works in DInomist as well, especially if you have DInomist charge on the field, because then you can pop one of your pendulum scales, you can get a draw, and you can add that pendulum scale right back to your hand with the effect of DInomist charge. But DInomists are actually in a special situation where they're like the only deck that can kind of use both of the pendulum focused Link monsters coming out in Link Frames. I'm of course talking about Qliphort Genius as well. Qliphort Genius, or you could say Qliphort can summon both of them, but Qliphort obviously can't special summon monsters that aren't Qliphort if they have pendulum scales. So I don't think you'll see many Qliphort decks make Heavy Metaphors Electrum, but this deck can actually make Electrum and it can make Genius. So this deck is definitely going to be getting a lot better. Now, the version he's running is based around like opening extremely strong. That's why you see Moray of Greed in here, because sometimes if you do open with too many DInomist cards, it can be a problem. He also runs Pot of Riches, a way of getting his resources back and drawing a whole bunch of cards. I like the DInomist. I really do like DInomist Howling. I still think that card is massively underrated. You see anytime that you open with DInomist Charge, you're in a really good position. That's what I think he was trying to dig for, and it's very interesting. This deck has an incredibly solid Magical Musketeer matchup, because you guys know the Magical Musketeers, a lot of their cards targets, and then obviously the DInomist Pendulum Scales can protect from targeting. So you see right here, he's going to target. His opponent is going to negate that with the scale. He's going to add his card right back to his hand from charge, and he's really not able to do anything. Sure, he's able to keep like Casper on the field. The problem with Casper, and really the problem with Magical Musketeers, I learned this over the weekend. If your opponent just puts a whole bunch of beaters in front of you, you're eventually going to run out of cards in your hand, and that's exactly what he's going to do. He negates one of the skills, but he's going to go into Electrum, and I think Electrum is going to be negated, but the problem is he cannot negate those, what's it called? He can't negate the Link monsters, so it doesn't matter, because he's just going to be able to pendulum some of those monsters back. And now that he's used up all the bullets in his hand, he doesn't have any more shots left in the chamber, and he's basically dead, especially when Electrum hits the end phase and it gets its stats back and it gets its ability back. He's going to also right here, very, very smart, he chains Howling, and now that's going to bounce Shoot of the Kid. So yeah, Shoot of the Kid is still going to activate, but you don't have any monsters on the board. So what is this Pot of Desires really doing? Obviously, Ash Blossom really isn't good against DInomist as a whole, because can't be activated to my knowledge during the damage step, which means it wouldn't even stop I just call this guy Pterodactyl. It wouldn't stop his effect, and it's really only good if you use it against DInomist Charge, but that's like the one card that they really have that searches immediately. So a lot of hand traps aren't good against him. Well, I would say obviously Ghost Ogre is good against any pendulum deck. So he actually runs Ties of the Brethren, which I had not seen in DInomist before, but it can be pretty good starting off with 3 monsters. Obviously better than starting with 1. Now this Trickstar guy he's doing some weird stuff. I don't know what was going on. I think once again you see DInomist Howling coming in clutch. It's going to allow him to instantly bounce the Candina on field. When Candina is off board, it kind of puts him in a weird position where he has to search out Lilybell to even make sure that he gets a monster on board. But he's going to go for DInomist Charge, and I think he's just going to summon Lycoris. It's an okay play. Now, I don't understand about this Cup of Ace. I think Cup of Ace and Trickstars is so ridiculously gimmicky. I would not touch it with a 10-foot pole, but he gives his opponent 4 cards. Once I saw that, I was like, bro, unless you have like 2 copies of Reincarnation down there, you're not going to be able to burn him to death. And it doesn't matter when he activates Reincarnation, because he just chains Howling and then he bounces the Lycoris to his hand. So at resolution, Lycoris is not on the field, and he plays limited removal, so he's not going to survive this unless he has battle traps don't matter either, because he does have the Dynamac power load, which obviously makes all his monsters Armadis. So DInomists do have a lot of weapons at their disposal. Limited removal was a card I always thought about in DInomist, just for being able to close out games. Like if you get an open field like that, you kind of just want to punish your opponent. And if you have the DInomist Howling, it makes it easier to get those open fields when you have an evac every single turn, because you essentially have a Magispector Kieran built into your archetype. It's not as good as Kieran having Howling, but it can be definitely solid. You see, once again, he opens with DInomist Charge and a copy of Ties of the Brethren, and this is a pretty interesting tech card I had not seen be played in DInomist. It's called Pendulum Paradox, and basically you get to add 2 cards from your Pendulum or from your extra deck face up, but it is a hard once per turn. So it's basically like a recovery card if you ever lose your skills. I believe he's going to activate the copy of Shooter the Kid. I really don't like opening with Shooter the Kid, because if it gets hit with Ash Blossom, it really suffers. Because it is a cost and you basically like lose a card. He goes into Electrum, that is going to get hit with Solemn, but he still can Pendulum from his hand because Charge just adds cards back to his hand. So even though his first Electrum got hit with the Solemn Strike, doesn't really matter because he's going to get the second one, and now he's going to activate the, what's it called? Now he activates that Pendulum Paradox, and he does finally just say, all right, I'm going to use my normal summon. He's going to go ahead and he's going to attempt to blow up Metaphor's Electrum, which is going to be successful. The problem is, guys, as you see, it's kind of easy to grind Magical Musketeers down to like 1 or 2 cards in their it's kind of easy to grind them out of their spells and traps when you put a bunch of big monsters on the board. That is the Achilles heel of that deck, especially just Pendulum matchups. If you can put a bunch of like really big monsters that are 1700, 1800 in front of them, they usually won't have enough ways to kill all of them, and then if they can't crack your skills, you just summon them back. So like DInomist is the worst matchup possible for a deck like Magical Musketeers, let alone the anti-targeting that this deck actually has. So you see right there, he tries to activate the Phoenix Chain spell, and his opponent just says, nope, I'm going to negate, and then at that point he'd just be able to kill him, and this would have been a +1 as well. Toon World is not going to save you, broski. Another match, actually, let's go to the Pendulum matchup. You guys don't want to see just Magical Musketeer duel over and over again. Now this isn't like the best Pendulum deck. As soon as I see Time Gazer in your opening hand, I'm just like, oh god, why is he running that terrible card? He goes for Joker. He's going to activate Howling, and then he activates Rush, not just getting full Pendulum scales, but dude, like DInomist Howling is such a ridiculous card. When you really look at it on paper, not only does it allow you to get Pendulum scales under Anti-Spell Fragrance, but the fact that it has a bounce. He goes for Scold-Eat. Scold-Eat's gonna bounce. It is going to resolve, and it gets him a Pendulum Graph of Ages, but was that really worth? I feel like, I guess he was really expecting it to go off, but I don't understand why he didn't just, expect him to use the bounce ability of DInomist Howling. Like, I wouldn't have even went into a Link monster there, so I think that was terrible resource management, especially because I don't know, the DInomist player can obviously Pendulum summon from his extra that can get the monster back. He goes for Heavy Metaphor's Electrum. He now activates DInomist Rush. He's just going to get a card back as well, and he's going to go ahead and bounce the Pendulum Graph of Ages. And now that he has DInomist Charge, I think he's in good shape. Once you get DInomist Charge, the duel becomes so much easier. Distributing your monsters for Howling, adding that monster right back to your hand doesn't really hurt you at all. He's going to activate Purple Poison to get rid of DInomist Howling, but Purple Poison is just going to be negated by giving up a scale, which is going to go right back to his hand anyway. So now he's going to use Howling, he's going to bounce, and the Pendulum player, effectively, the Pendulum Magician player, he didn't really get anywhere. He got rid of scales, but if you look at his opening hand, he still has scales in his hand, and he could even search out, like, let's say he didn't have the scales that he needed, even though he has a 3 and a 6, he could even activate Moray of Greed, and he could dig for, like, other Pendulum scales or whatnot. And that's actually what he's going to do. Gets 1 scale, he's going to pop it, he's going to draw, he's going to add back to his hand, and he gets another copy of DInomist Charge. And at that point, I'm like, yeah, I think he's about to kick your chest in, my good sir. Pendulum summons 3, he's going to use the bounce effect, and I think that's pretty much it. He can't even, it's crazy, right? He can't even activate his limiter removal, which would have been super duper like OTK game, but doesn't really matter. He's able to get game regardless. Let's go to the final match, or the final duel. Once again, it is against Magical Musketeers, and in this duel, Magical Musketeers get to go first, because I know some people might be like, Cap G, in every single one of these duels, this guy has got to, he's opened every single duel. A lot of times he is open with DInomist Charge, so let's see what happens when he does indeed go second. And man, Magical Musketeers, if you ever open up with the Doctor, or if you open up with this guy, Shooter Wild, who is essentially a Daigusto Emerald for the archetype, these are not good. These are not cards you want to have on the field turn 1. He's going to go for Ties of the Brethren, but it's not going to actually resolve because he gets sniped out by the Death Parado, which essentially says no to it. He does have a nice copy of Ash Blossom in his hand. Ash Blossom can, of course, negate if he does top deck a DInomist Charge or something like that. Him using DInomist Howling did get the Doctor's effect, so Doctor is able to add the Parado back to his hand, but he has a massive Pendulum Summon. That's going to get hit with Solemn Strike, and I was like, okay, I think he's got this. I think he might actually be able to pull this off. The problem is when he goes for the target, the targeting is just, it's not going to do anything, man. He's going to use the targeting. He's going to use his scale to essentially stop the targeting, just like he did just now. He uses the scale to stop the destruction, and this is where Magical Musketeers struggle because the monsters are not really suited to constantly have to deal with opponents' monsters that are like 1700 and up. I know that sounds really like a terrible archetype, but you see this one monster sitting on the field. He does use the Ash Blossom. This guy actually is in here for a good amount of duel, or a good amount of the duel, and he gets a second copy of Ties of the Brethren. So the Magical Musketeer definitely, like, he had his opportunities to win. Obviously, Maxi, not a very good top deck, and without having any more of his Magical Musketeer spells and traps, the deck is just, I mean, anything can kind of beat it down at that point. You could be playing, Dino Rabbit with just a whole bunch of vanillas and have no rabbits, and you could completely overwhelm Magical Musketeers if they don't have the cards in their hand, because it doesn't really seem like Honest is the great natural fit. I tried it out yesterday. I didn't really love it, and I don't know. So that is the duels, guys. Actually, let's show off the deck list really quickly. So this is what the deck looks like, and for those of you guys who don't really know about DInomist, the entire archetype is water-based, it's machine-based, and the pendulum scales are 3s and 6s, and each one of them gives you a layer of protection. You have your 6 scales that protect your DInomist cards from activated effects that target on your opponent's side of the field. So if your opponent has like a Cosmic Cyclone or something like that, you can just destroy your DInomist card in the scale, and then you get to negate that card. So it's definitely pretty nice. And then your 3 protect your dudes from being destroyed by battle or card effects. So this works on monsters, it works on your scales, your back row. So it's really nice because it protects you from like Wavering Eyes. And actually, Wavering Eyes doesn't beat this build of DInomist. Not only does he have any of his 3 skills that can negate something like Wavering Eyes, but then he also has Pendulum and Penetrable that can just stop all forms of spell and trap destruction that try to get rid of his back row. This stops targeting, it stops them from being destroyed by card effects. So you'll have to use something like Trishula or Ignister to actually get rid of the skills in that situation. And giving up your skills in DInomist isn't a problem, because if you guys know about DInomist Charge, this is a card that when one of your cards is destroyed and it goes to your extra deck, you actually get to add that card back to your hand. And it just, it's good resource management. It makes it so that you can use Howling over and over again. It makes it so that if your opponent tries to use a card, tries to bait you out of using one of your protections, it's fine because the card goes back to your hand. Anyways, I did find it really cool that he played multiple copies of Ties of the Brethren. You usually don't see that in pendulum decks, but this is not a deck that's generally going to pendulum summon that much turn 1. Think about it, if you do open with like DInomist Charge plus 2 pendulum scales, you want to play those scales to get the protection for the rest of your cards on your field, but you might only have like one monster to actually pendulum summon. So Ties of the Brethren is a good way to take one monster that you pendulum summoned or that you normal summoned and turn that into like 3 cards. And DInomist do have a lot of good stun effects. They have non-targeting removal with a card like DInomist Rex. This is one of the only decks that can actually get scales under anti-spell fragrance because of DInomist Howling. Not only does it just place the cards in the pendulum scale, but it also gives you evac ability to get rid of your opponent's problem monsters if they have stuff like, I don't know, any Link monster. And you guys might actually notice that there's no Moray of Greed in this deck, despite there were Moray of Greeds in the duels, and that's because he just experimented with multiple different versions. This version right here is just obviously based around keeping your pendulum scales up at all costs, and even worst case scenario, if you do happen to lose your skills and you don't have Charge, you don't have Pendulum and Penetrable to protect those skills, you can recover them back with the Pendulum Paradox, and then during your next turn, hopefully you should be able to be in a winning position. Or if you have like your DInomist Howling, that'll get you right right back in the game. This was a card I had never seen before, Magnet Force. It makes all of your rock or machine monsters unaffected by your opponent's card effects, and that's really crucial because the entire DInomist archetype is machines. So if you have this plus like limit or removal, your opponent really can't do shit to whatever you're trying to do. Like if you're trying to just push for game, you're trying to OTK them at that point, not a lot that they can actually do to stop that because ain't nobody really running battle traps right now. The extra deck is super diverse, and again, as I said earlier, the deck is it's not getting any DInomist link monsters, but the 2 link monsters that are coming out greatly benefit this deck. So the deck will be in the description below for you guys to download it. Whatever you guys thought, leave it in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching. As always, subscribe if you have not already and turn on those notifications for daily videos.